Not too long ago, I finished reading the Yu Yu Hakusho manga, after which the Hunter x Hunter 2011 Dick Writing Association asked me which I preferred, the anime adaptation or reading the original manga. To which I responded that to pick one or the other rather misses the point. The anime adaptation and the manga of Yu Yu Hakusho both expand on each other in necessary ways. Separating the two doesn't really accomplish anything other than reducing the enjoyment of the other. For those who aren't aware, the Yu Yu Hakusho manga is significantly shorter than the anime's runtime would suggest. Following the shonen adaptation rule as stated in Ember Review's video, that being 2 chapters for every 1 episode, it would logically follow that the manga would have a length of almost 300 chapters. Instead, the manga has a mere 175, in comparison to the anime's 112 episodes. As you can extrapolate, the Yu Yu Hakusho anime has a large amount of filler, expanding content, and even some character arcs that weren't present in the manga. On top of all of that, the anime also cuts out large swaths of content from the manga that expands on both the story's themes in ways both minor and major. While usually the term filler causes most anime fans to groan with displeasure, Yu Yu Hakusho is a rather exceptional case. Almost all of the added content only serves to further Yoshihiro Togashi's vision of the story. Almost all of it, at least. After reflecting on the themes and ideas of Yu Yu Hakusho, I can't help but notice where the anime occasionally adds too much content, or otherwise misinterprets the trajectory of the narrative. The game for me becomes a rather messy process of determining what anime content should be cut, revised, reinterpreted, to make for the optimal viewing experience. And that's what I'm here to do today. In effect, we are examining both texts under a microscope, and creating a context to ultimately enjoy Yu Yu Hakusho to its fullest, throughout which I will be highlighting where the anime missed a few swings, and where it knocked it into the solar system. I would hope that this is the sort of thing you clicked for, as I don't have any sort of interest in a spicy takedown of the series, nor do I think I would be able to write one in good conscience. With that out of the way, I, Calliope, will be your speaker for today, but allow CherryBoyWriter, the author, to set the stage. Back from the grave once again. Perhaps the most important part of watching Yu Yu Hakusho is having an express understanding of the central theme of the story. Pinning down such a task is shockingly harder than it sounds. What gives ToGODshi's work such life is something almost intangible for outsiders looking on. The most powerful ability ToGODshi has in his arsenal is cohesion, brought on by experience and appreciation for all aspects of life. It's an idea directly touched on in the cooking section of the Hunter exams, that things which you might consider trivial or mundane in nature are in fact things which people dedicate their entire lives to mastering for that joy alone. This sort of appreciation for life can be seen most prominently in the ways Hunter x Hunter goes about conveying its messages, whether it's cooking, ToGODshi's love of video games, referencing famous artworks, creating a logical puzzle, or even appraising objects. ToGODshi dives deep into many different subject matters, learning what makes them tick and what people love about them, then uses that knowledge to elevate his own work. I tell you all of that to put into context the theme of Yu Yu Hakusho in greater detail. Because of ToGODshi's appreciation for life, it can seem like pinning down the themes of his stories are difficult, as the specific focus seems to shift from place to place. But if in fact you take a more broad view, the scope becomes more grand and clear. If the theme of Hunter x Hunter is an appreciation for life, then the theme for Yu Yu Hakusho is coming back to live your life after losing everything. While Hakusho's subject matter can also seemingly show this tendency to bounce around from theme to theme, this is the prevailing idea that ties together every major character. From Yusuke to his friends, to Toguro and Genkai, to Sensui to Yomai. Keep this theme in mind, as it will be the main thing informing my decisions of what I believe should be praised, altered, or cut from the anime. Alteration 1. Insert. The daily life of Yusuke the Ghost. I have a confession. I love shonen daily life arcs. One unique trend in shonen manga, because of their previously long run length, is to shift genres, usually from gag manga or slice of life to action. Hakusho proved to also have this happen. However, all of the interesting side stories that existed in the beginning volumes of the manga were almost immediately cut from the anime, without anything even close to a mention. Daily life arcs carry a unique quality, particularly in shonen, being that they are investment-based, low-tension arcs. Given that many people generally come to shonen manga for high-intensity storytelling, daily life arcs offer a unique time for the author to build more personal traits and connections between the world, characters, and readers, all while expanding on the themes in a low-stakes way. For these reasons, daily life arcs carry with them the interesting tendency to only be truly appreciated in retrospective. For a more in-depth example of this happening, I recommend reading Lethargic Rambling's defense of the daily life arc of Hitman Reborn. My point here is that these early chapters do a large amount of the legwork to establish who Yusuke Urameshi is, what his habits are, and how his relationships with others work and affect him. For those who have not read ToGODshi's other manga and have not seen Level E, it is really important to know that he is a very experienced author. Side note, because I don't think I'll get a better opportunity to talk about this, ToGODshi's first serialized manga in Weekly Shonen Jump was Wicked Cupid, which I'd say is almost a prototype for Yu Yu Hakusho, or at least the main character kind of looks like Yusuke and it has like this theme of demons. But it clearly shows that ToGODshi has an appreciation for a lot of different genres, like he can do romantic comedy very well, and the romance aspect clearly carried over very well to Yu Yu Hakusho. But I really liked the few chapters that were translated into English, and it's a shame that we don't have the full manga translated in English. Like, there's only 5 chapters or so, and the rest of the 4 volumes are stuck in Japanese. This is an absolute travesty. This is like part of our scripture being missing and untranslated. This cannot happen. The significance of the daily life arc. Oh, look at this. I didn't even read the next part of the script, but here we go. ToGODshi is incredibly skilled at making all sorts of stories, and is honestly a master of multiple genres. Hence why we call him ToGODshi. As such, my first change to Hakusho is just to get these chapters animated. If you are a fan of Yu Yu Hakusho, you really do owe it to yourself to read these chapters and cry, laugh, be happy, because they are just gems. Chapter 4 about how Yusuke helps a little boy who lost his dog, Hope, and pick himself up will leave you misty-eyed every time. However, another thing the daily life arc of Yu Yu Hakusho did was really establish the ins and outs of Yusuke's golden egg trial. And the details of this trial will lead me directly into the first few of my controversial opinions on the Yu Yu Hakusho anime. Alteration 2, Changes, Pachinko Machines, Fighting Games, and Goblin King. Select your fighter, an irrelevant Street Fighter reference I felt like making. Perhaps one of my shortest and least interesting edits, I will admit. But nevertheless, I wanted to address it now before we get too deep into the complexities of Yusuke Urameshi as a person and the later arcs. Throughout both the early chapters of Hakusho and at various points in the story, we get scattered scenes of Yusuke sitting down at arcades or pachinko machines. However, between the anime and the manga, the details get rather muddled. In the manga, we are shown scenes of Yusuke either gambling away cash at the pachinko machines or indulging in fighting games at the arcade. But in the anime, despite the fact that Yusuke is a delinquent, it cannot actually show him gambling because he's underage. Instead, the anime opted for a third option, and instead gave us scenes of Yusuke playing the titular video game, Goblin King, which would become an important plot point to the Chapter Black arc with the introduction of Game Master. Now, of course, this is hardly even a major detail in the long run, and is less important than most things. However, the fact that Yusuke only plays fighting video games is something I consider to be an important point of characterization. By changing his gaming habits like in the anime, you inadvertently change a small aspect of Yusuke's character, in ways that just aren't him. So my change for this section is to just imagine whenever Yusuke is seen playing Pachinko or Goblin Slayer, just mentally amend that to a fighting game. My reasoning for such a minor and unimportant edit goes rather deep. Now before I continue, I just want to say that I loathe using this word to describe just about anything. Mostly because it's a buzzword, talking point people use to praise things they barely understand, and thus muddy the waters around the discussion. But I see no other word to describe him, so here it goes. Yusuke Urameshi is one of, if not the most complex anime character ever written. By complex, I don't mean by pretentious meanings as usual, like just being difficult to understand, or dealing with deep issues or motivations. No, what I mean by complex is that Yusuke legitimately just has many different drives, all conflicting and colliding within him, at any given point, much like an actual person. Most characters in general are usually defined by 1 or 2 events, drives, or goals. For some sort examples, think of, say, Guts from Berserk. I have seen many people claim that he's a complex character, but really he can reduce his motivations down to a simple love and revenge. If you want to be short about it, try another character like Vash the Stampede, who simply wants to avoid violence and be a pacifist. It's a fairly straightforward motivation. This isn't to say that their plights aren't given a significant amount of weight, but they are more what I would describe as deep instead of complex. In contrast, Yusuke has many faces that he must consider wearing, because he has many desires that come into direct conflict. Yu Yu Hakusho is, at its core, a story about Yusuke exploring each of these desires, and choosing between them. He never rejects them outright, but as the story goes on, he deprioritizes them as he hones in closer and closer to finding his life's calling. Yusuke is torn between the things he loves. He has to repeatedly choose. Am I Yusuke the violent thug, Yusuke the hero, Yusuke the fighter, or Yusuke the whipping boy of Keiko? As summarized by a wonderful anime-only line at the beginning of the Three Kings arc, Genkai states to the group,
"And as he's discovered, sometimes the more you see, the less clear things become. Yusuke thought he knew it all. He thought he was just some dime-a-dozen punk. But the more he learns about himself, the more confused he gets. I think we owe it to him to allow him the chance to fumble around in the darkness for answers. Because the truth of it is, we can't stop his demon blood from causing him to do wrong. We just have to have faith.
Which is a great encapsulation of everything the story has been. When I say the anime dialogue does wonders for the story, I truly mean it. To bring it back to center, this is why I propose you change the various scenes of Yusuke goofing off to him playing fighting games. It reinforces the idea that he's found something that he loves and doesn't want to give up. Fighting is one of the ways Yusuke connects to the world around him. He and Genkai even have several scenes of them just playing fighting games together, and him losing badly. While you could keep the Pachinko machines, they only really exist to reinforce the idea that Yusuke is also a punk, and old habits die hard. But considering that if you're watching Yu Yu Hakusho and either listening to his hilariously foul language in English,
He what? I've planned a formal meeting to... Earth the toddler bitch! You better speak now before I forever put that pacifier 10 inches down your throat!
or just watching his quick temper in general, I think his punk nature comes across well enough. We'll discuss Yusuke's motivations and mask as we go deeper into the arcs, but let us move on to the last alteration for part 1. Alteration 3, Interpretation. Koenma is not our friend. After going through Yu Yu Hakusho, I have come to what is likely going to be my most controversial opinion. Not only to you all, but also to myself, as I am split right down the middle with how to interpret Koenma between these two versions. My overarching opinion on our Hell Warden pacifier friend is that what Koenma was meant to represent and do for the story and Yusuke was missed by the anime entirely. It becomes a decision that inevitably has rippling effects outwards to the later developments and themes of the narrative. In exchange for that, however, the anime turned Koenma into a thoroughly enjoyable character that is hard to imagine the series without as portrayed in the anime. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Why do I have this opinion in the first place? As always, let's return to our base theme, Yusuke's theme of coming back to life and learning to live again. In the Hakusho anime adaptation, Yusuke at the beginning is given a golden egg by Botan and Koenma that houses Pooh, and told that more good deeds he does, the more positive energy the egg will accumulate. When hatched, if the beast will be good, it will lead Yusuke back to his body. If bad, the beast will eat him right then and there. Thus, this explanation sets up the road ahead for Ghost Yusuke. In all, this works more or less the same as it does in the manga, except with a huge glaring difference. In the manga, knowledge of how the egg hatches are expressly hidden from Yusuke. He is not told that he has an express chance of dying from this egg hatching, and it's for a good reason. At the beginning of the series, Yusuke Urameshi is not a bane or a boon to the spirit world, or society in general. If anything, given his prior behavior, Yusuke should probably be sent to hell regardless. It was only by chance that he died to Truck Kun too soon before anyone expected him to. Given this, why would the spirit world tell him the details of his trial? When not telling Yusuke Urameshi that he needs to be good thus coheres him into being good, Yusuke could very well have had a mind to play along and do good deeds, and then continue to be a high school bum after revival. It's this logic that keeps the secret of the golden egg from being revealed to Yusuke. They want to gauge his pure uncovered actions. What you should be understanding from this is that the spirit world and Koenma are not explicitly on friendly terms with Yusuke. I make this clear because despite how much of Koenma's commentary we get in the anime, during this opening arc, after Koenma hands over the egg, he's barely heard from again. Not a level of funny cast of the gang, or a constant secondary narrator of the plot, but an entirely neutral and mostly uninvested judge, continually evaluating Yusuke's actions. These two betrayals, one of a friendly and sarcastic ruler, and the other of him being a judgmental, enigmatic figure, run rather contrary to each other. However, this is where it goes from playful interpretation to thematically harmful. Why? Let's return to the main theme in Yusuke's early state. Let us pass over the obvious descriptors of Yusuke's character that we all are familiar with. Punk kid, likes fighting, bad parents, borderline abusive teacher figures. There are several odd tellings that Yusuke's heart and body are not in line, which gradually become more clear in the daily life arc, and ultimately becomes the reason Koenma decides to put Yusuke back into his body prematurely and permanently, until of course Pooh hatches and decides to eat him or not. In the manga daily life arc, Yusuke spends basically all of his time helping out random people and spirits to either live their lives, accept passing grief, or being a good friend to them. Now to us the audience who have mostly seen only Yusuke's good parts, this is mostly familiar and to be expected. The inciting incident of Yu Yu Hakusho is Yusuke making a child smile, and then attempting to save his life. However, those are but mere sparks of humanity in the eyes of the spirit world, who, as can be seen in their attitude and classification of Yusuke, have already written him off as a punk kid with a penchant for violence and gambling. Yusuke may be a punk with a heart of gold, but he doesn't show it within his material everyday actions, which is what the spirit world judges. Perhaps one of the most important roles Keiko plays in this narrative is being to anchor us to her and Yusuke's past experiences, and ensure to us that Yusuke was always a good person. if only to Keiko. To Spirit World, and by that I mean to Koenma, Yusuke's behaviors appear to be entirely erratic. When he's in his body, he seems to only indulge in violence and other sins like gambling. When out of his body, Yusuke hardly even seems to give his vices a thought, as he throws himself into other people's problems in order to help them lead better lives and deaths. This struggle between love of violence, desire to help people, and later his love of Keiko is ultimately the dynamic that will shape Yusuke as he comes back to live his life. But for now, we pin this conversation. In chapter 15, we get the true explanation of why Koenma decided to let Yusuke back into his body. It was because they could not pin down the precise nature of his soul. The conclusion he comes to? Yusuke is geared only towards physical responses. He acts without thinking. As such, he's a total idiot. So leaving him as a spirit does no good, as it only measures his nature, and not how he acts when rubber meets the road. This nature versus nurture dynamic, that stresses that people are shaped by environmental factors, is a staple of ToGODshi's writing, as noticed by Alexander's many excellent Hunter x Hunter videos. However, the takeaway from this is that the decision to allow Yusuke back into his body was not one born out of empathy for him, as was my impression from watching the anime, which treats Koenma and Yusuke as more familiar. Rather, it was a calculated one. In his body, Koenma could have Yusuke fall victim to his old habits while still exploiting him for detective work, and then Pooh could have hatched and eaten him whole. This angle of interpretation is much more difficult to arrive at solely from watching the anime. In that light, Koenma is little better than Yusuke's mother or teacher, just another authority figure in his life using him to their own ends, and largely ambivalent to his future. In more ways than one, it's fair to say that Yusuke is alienated from the good life that he protects his fellow humans from by fighting demons. Alienated from his desires as a person and from his emotions. It's a clash of interests that fits in line with the story's themes, coming back to live life after losing everything. As a last-minute addendum, if you look at the wording, Koenma promises Yusuke will get back his body one way or another. However, whether he lives or dies with the egg is another matter entirely. In that light, he's almost worse. It's this thematic richness that's lost in the anime adaptation. So do I recommend changing it to better fit the anime? Maybe? Here's the thing, for as much as manga Koenma brings to the table in terms of tying the story together, it's just hard to imagine Yu Yu Hakusho without that lovable man-baby Koenma commentating and sassing back with Yusuke as much as he does. Call me out for bias, but I enjoy both versions of Koenma, even though they contradict each other in many ways. Not only that, but it isn't as if this idea of Yusuke being used and alienated really vanishes with Koenma's role changed, it just reinforces it. In fact, when it comes time for the chapter Black arc to roll around, one could argue that Koenma getting closer to Yusuke, instead of keeping him at arm's reach, like he did Sensui, helps show the contrast and the importance of connection and friendship that's just very shonen. I know this has been a very long-winded section, so some might have been expecting something more conclusive, but I don't really have any solid answers here. It might be a bit of a letdown, but in my eyes, that's part of the reason it was worth doing. That a story can be so rich and well crafted that it can be viewed from two conflicting angles, that can be equally as engaging, is in many ways its own reward. That will close out what I will label part 1 for now. Despite the fact that this is one of my longer works at almost 3,500 words, I want to stress I'm not even remotely close to being done. Despite the fact that I pulled from all over the anime to make this analysis, I have covered at most the first 2 volumes of Yu Yu Hakusho. There's infinitely more work for me to do, but for now I hope this will tide you over until part 2. Until then, you can subscribe, like this video, share it around, and consider supporting us on Patreon. This year in 2020, hopefully we can make Shonen Ronin HQ happen. I mean, obviously we'll do this by working part-time jobs, but if me and CherryBoyWriter start renting a place, and then later bring over Hunter x Hunter 2011 Dick Writing Association, I can guarantee you that we'll be pumping out content analyzing ToGODshi even more. But if you need your Hunter x Hunter fix right now immediately, then I have a recommendation for you. Please go subscribe to Evan X Evan right now. She's probably the most underrated anime analysis channel for Hunter x Hunter right now on the platform. So please do yourself a favor and go sub. You won't regret it. I'll see you later with part 2.